All right. Welcome everybody to our Zooniverse webinar, and thank you very much for making the time to attend and support this webinar. This is a wonderful example of our community building collaboration between Faith in Place, Chicago Muslim Green Team in Chicago, Planetary Science Institute, Zooniverse, and American Association for the Advancement of American Science and Docere. So please feel free to introduce yourself and where you're joining us from. You can state the city and state you're coming from. And also feel free to make comments in the chat section on the right side of your screen. And if you happen to have any question or comment, please use the question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. And we'll address your question during the Q&A session after the panel presentations. So I just would like to make a note that this webinar is being recorded and only the panelists will be featured in the video. So if you are not interested in being in the video, don't worry. Only the panelists will be recorded. I see here Anne Sibolkis from Chicago. Hi, Anne. Welcome to the webinar. So being part of a community gives us a sense of belonging, enables us to learn from each other, develop skills, make contacts, and allow us to improve the quality of life and support perpetual growth of ourselves, each other, and our environment. So social justice and being responsible guardians of the earth are really valued across diverse cultures and religious traditions. And this free webinar aims to demonstrate how people of faith can participate in environmental research using the Zooniverse platform. Hopefully, by the end of this webinar, you will find the answers that you might have, like, what is a Zooniverse platform? How can we be part of it? How can we strengthen our community with this platform? So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Reverend Brian Sauder, Executive Director and President of Faith in Place, and he will provide a brief introduction to this webinar collaboration. So a little bit of background about Reverend Sauder. He serves as at Faith in Place and the Faith in Place Action Fund as the President and Executive Director. Reverend Sauder's passion is empowering faith communities across Illinois to take measurable steps to connect the dots between faith, environmental justice, poverty, mass incarceration, race, violence, class, and health. So, Reverend Sauder, the screen is yours now. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rahani. It is such a pleasure to be introduced by you and to celebrate the collaboration that has gone to make this evening possible. At Faith in Place, we believe that people of faith are the prophetic voices in our community, the prophetic voices that are naming the environmental injustices that we face and how they're connected to racial injustices. And that has we as people of faith and justice, by partnering together, we can be the leaders to create the world that we want to see: cleaner air, water that's available for everybody, basements that are free from flooding, food that's accessible to all, good music, the type of vibrant, flourishing communities that we all want to see. We make happen through Faith in Place's mission of education, connection, and advocacy, this mission of healthier communities. And we do this over 20 years. We've learned we do this by coaching amazing green teams. People like Dr. Rahani, who's the CEO of the Chicago Muslims Green Team Group. She just recently became the CEO of the group, and she's leading the Chicago Muslims Green Team Group to advance this vision that we all share. And I want to shout out tonight someone very special, Faith in Place Board Director Caroline Williams, also a leader with the Chicago Muslims Green Team. Caroline had the vision to bring this collaboration together tonight, and just want to give her a big shout out for all her leadership as on the Faith in Place board and also in her community as she continues to connect the dots for using environmental justice and science and putting those things together and driving forward and bringing this passion is what really made this webinar happen tonight. And of course, part of our collaboration tonight is the Lincoln Park Zoo. We get to hear from Seth Magley later this evening. Very excited for the Lincoln Park Zoo to be a part of us. And last but not least, the Planetary Science Institute, Dr. Grace Wolfchase being here with us tonight is a great joy. And that's just a few of the members that made this collaboration happen together. So on behalf of Faith in Place, welcome to you all. Thanks for participating. Can't wait to learn more about citizen science and the Zooniverse platform this evening. And with that, Dr. Rahani, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Sauter, for the inspiring and welcoming message. So next, I'm going to introduce our first panelist is Dr. Grace Wolfchase. Dr. Grace Wolfchase holds a bachelor's degree in physics from Cornell University and a PhD in astronomy from the University of Arizona. She's been a professional astronomer who studies the origins of stars and planets for nearly 30 years. Her current research focuses on understanding a class of infant star clusters that were discovered by citizen scientists working on the Milky Way project, one of hundreds of research projects that have been featured on the Zooniverse platform. She is currently a senior scientist and senior education and communication specialist at the Planetary Science Institute, a nonprofit organization headquartered in Tucson, Arizona, that has member scientists around the world. Grace is particularly interested in holding and building positive relationships across different cultures, particularly scientific and religious communities. So in partnership with the AAAS Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion, Grace is currently leading an effort to engage faith-based and interfaith communities in research experiences using the Zooniverse platform. And a little personal detail about Grace. She has 3 adult children and she resides in Naperville, Illinois with her spouse, Dennis, and a much loved companion cat named Stormy. So let's hear from Dr. Grace Wolfchase, who will give us further details about the Zooniverse platform. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you so much, Rahani. And thank you, Faith in Place and the Chicago Muslims Green Team for hosting this webinar. So since I'm an astronomer, the first thing I'd like to do is highlight the photo that you see. That's the background image on my slide. Now, most of you probably aren't old enough to remember when this photo of the Earth was taken by the Apollo 8 astronauts orbiting the moon on Christmas Eve in 1968, but I am. I can also remember how connected we all felt seeing the Earth from space with no visible signs of borders. It made people feel connected in a way that we had never felt before. And I can also remember the words of Jim Lovell afterwards, who later remarked, when I put my thumb up to the window, I could completely hide it. And then I realized that behind my thumb, that I'm hiding the Earth, and there are about 6 billion people that are all striving to live there. Images of the Earth from space like these remind us how unique, fragile, and precious our world is. And I'm very thankful for organizations like Faith in Place and the Chicago Muslims Green Team that are dedicated to protecting the only home that we have. So I'm here today to show you how you can join a worldwide community of people of all ages and from all walks of life who help us learn more about our incredible planet by participating in many wonderful research projects using an online platform called Zooniverse. Zooniverse connects participants to each other and to researchers in diverse fields of study. Using this online platform enables everyone, all ages and from all walks of life, to take part in the exciting process of discovering new things. Many of the research projects are focused on ecology and the environment. And since April is both Earth Month and Citizen Science Month, it's a great time to start participating, especially since you can do so from almost anywhere. So I'm going to begin by playing a short video to introduce you to Zooniverse, and later I'll show you how to navigate the website.
A brief introduction to the Zooniverse. The way we generate knowledge has changed a lot over the last century. Technological advances are creating huge amounts of data that can be hard for researchers to handle by themselves. The Zooniverse is an online platform that connects these struggling researchers with people all around the world who want to help. Together, these volunteers have contributed to many incredible discoveries and a huge amount of wonderful science, such as helping to sift through 1 million images of galaxies in the first project, Galaxy Zoo. Not only did this help to create the most comprehensive survey of galaxies, having so many eyes look at each single data point led to many unexpected discoveries, including a new class of galaxy that appeared as small green blobs, or as the volunteers called them, peas. The Zooniverse has since grown to include over 150 different research projects across all sorts of subject areas and scales, from the stellar to the subcellular and everything else in between. All of this is possible because of a community of nearly 2 million volunteers around the globe, who together are changing the way that modern research is done. Why don't you explore the Zooniverse today?
Okay, so as you saw from that video, we need your help. Basically, citizen science crowdsources the time and abilities of a distributed community of people around the world, utilizing the unique ability that human beings have to spot patterns and make new discoveries. Citizen science is actually using human classifications to train machines to become better at these things, but the human element is always going to be needed. Citizen scientists extend the reach of what professional scientists can accomplish by enabling very large research projects. And in doing so, they become part of the process of making scientific discoveries. Science is a process, not a collection of facts. And participating in that process is a great way to learn more about the research and the scientists leading the research. So Zooniverse is the world's largest and most popular online platform for citizen science. The main organizations behind Zooniverse are the University of Oxford, the Adler Planetarium, and the University of Minnesota. The projects span many different fields of academic research in both the sciences and the humanities. And now there are actually over 2 million participants worldwide, all ages and all walks of life. At a given time, there can be as many as 100 active research projects from which to choose. And Zooniverse projects have resulted in hundreds of publications in top journals in the science and humanities. In fact, citizen scientists have occasionally gotten their name on some of these papers. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, why should I consider participating in citizen science? Well, people have many different reasons for participating. The most frequent reason we've heard is that many people simply want to contribute to advancing human knowledge. Here are a few more reasons to consider. There's the practical. Science is empowering. It enables us to improve conditions in our communities and even across the world. There's the more esoteric. Experiencing awe and wonder is part of what makes us human. You may be the first person to discover something completely new in working on a Zooniverse research project, and you don't need to have any particular background in order to do so. And all of us here tonight are interested in things like social justice and good stewardship. These are values that are shared across diverse cultures and religious traditions. And many Zooniverse research projects focus on ecology and the environment, as you'll see in just a couple of minutes here. Zooniverse research projects are only possible through the efforts of many individuals. And you'll find that in participating in projects, there are these wonderful discussion boards where you can connect to other people with similar interests, as well as to the research teams that lead the projects. So in thinking about the environment, it helps to remember that human beings are part of a complex web of relationships with other species on Earth. So caring for other species is often critically intertwined with caring for ourselves. Many of us also feel a moral obligation to protect other life on our planet. In a little while, you'll hear from a great project called Chicago Wildlife Watch. So here I'm just going to briefly talk about a few additional projects that may be of interest to many ages, and then I'll take you for a short tutorial on the Zooniverse website. Now, each project in the Zooniverse has its own URL, but the great thing is zooniverse.org/projects is the one-stop shopping where you can access all the other projects. Whoops. So I am now going to take you to the website. And so right now you ought to be seeing my browser. This is the home page of Zooniverse. And the first thing you're going to want to do, if you don't already have, if you haven't already registered to participate in Zooniverse, is register. I'm already registered. I'm not going to sign in for the purpose of this demonstration, but I really encourage you to register. You actually don't need to sign in to participate in Zooniverse projects, but registration gets you a whole lot of other features that you can't get if you don't have a username. For example, email updates that even give things like times where you can participate in office hours with various projects. You can track your projects. You can get credit for discoveries. You can join the discussion boards, and you can even build your own research project. So I'll say a little bit more about that later. Also on the home page, there's information on where to go to download a mobile app. Now, a cautionary note, the mobile app, you can't do as much with mobile devices as you can do using a larger device like a computer, but you can do some things on some projects. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. If you go up here to the main menu and click on About, you'll get information about Zooniverse as a whole, you know, how to participate in projects. I'm telling you some of that right now. And also links to the many, many publications. You can also find links to the publications at the bottom of the page. And just to get a sense for all the wonderful research that has come out of Zooniverse projects. Now, if I come up here and click on projects, this is where you go to see the full suite of projects that are available. Now you'll see three possibilities at the top here: active, paused, and finished. The active projects are the ones that currently have data, so you can participate in these. Sometimes projects run out of data and become paused or finished. So we're going to make sure we're on the active projects. And I just want to draw your attention to this scroll bar here and all the different subject areas. So we have subject areas like the arts, biology, climate, history, language, literature, medicine, nature, physics, social science, space. Did I miss anything? Currently, there are 74 active projects. More than half of those are in biology or nature. And a lot of the projects are cross-referenced under different areas. Biology and nature share a lot of projects in common, as do the projects under climate. Now, what you'll be doing in different projects depends upon the project itself. You may be looking at images or texts or graphs, or in some cases, you might actually be listening to audio files. You can sort projects by most recent projects, most active, most popular, most help needed. You can also search for a project. So if I typed in Seth's project here, Chicago Wildlife, whoops, got to spell it correctly. Chicago Wildlife Watch comes up. You'll be seeing a lot about that later. So right now, I'm going to click on climate. And we're going to go to a particular project called Penguin Watch, where I will show you, basically give you an overview of how to participate in a project. So the first thing you might want to do is get a sense of what different projects are about by looking at the suite of projects. You'll see here, if I mouse over these individual icons, you get a short description of what each of those projects is about, but you actually have to click on the icon to go to the home page of the project and to get more information about the project. So here we've come to the project Penguin Watch. And one of the things that you might want to do is go down here to where it says Penguin Watch Statistics. Now, if you only intend to participate in a certain project over a short period of time, and you don't care whether the project gets paused, participate whether it's, whether it's hard, it's only 10% complete or it's 99% complete. However, if you're a teacher and educator and you want to use one of these projects in the classroom, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a bit. You're probably going to want to pick a project that's not 99% complete. Why? Because you may be working on that project over the course of weeks. And it's very frustrating if a project runs out of data and disappears before you're done with it. So one of the first things you want to do before you start working on any project is hit learn more to get a sense of the background of the project, like what the research is all about. So in this case, Penguin Watch is about basically tagging, identifying penguins in images, identifying eggs of penguins and identifying chicks, young penguins. And the reason this is important because the big idea here is that seabirds spend the majority of their life at sea and feed near the top of the food chain. So changes in their populations actually are used as indicators to reflect changes in the wider ecosystem. So learning about penguins in the Antarctica region is important for basically understanding the health of marine life. So you'll see here, there are various different background information you can get by clicking on these different tabs. I clicked on research here, so you get a background of what's going on in the project. You can click on the team to get a sense of who's all involved. And you'll see this is a mega collaboration that involves many different institutions around the world, and give you some background about the team that is actually conducting the research. You can click on results to get a sense of what's happening when you actually go through a project and go through the tasks of a project, how that's being processed, and how that the information that you supply is being translated into publications, which is important, which is the goal of the research, actually learning new things and getting out publications. Education is particularly important for teachers. This is where you can go to find on a particular project how that project is being used in classrooms. There's also a general education page I'll show you in a minute, where you can go to basically learn how Zooniverse projects are being used from elementary through secondary school and beyond, in college as well. Depending upon the project, some projects are more suitable to younger ages. Some, like Penguin Watch, from the researchers' own mouths, are basically Penguin Watch can be done by people over the age of about 5 who are interested in contributing to penguin conservation, excuse me, not conversations, although penguins may have some interesting conversations as well. So there's an FAQ where you can go to for help. And once you've read about the background of a project and you know something about it, you'll want to click on Classify and first go through a tutorial to make sure that you understand what you're looking for. Now in Penguin Watch, you're going to be looking at photographs of animals. In projects in space science, you'd be looking at far off images in space, but here we're looking at photographs that are captured by cameras, and in this case, drones, that are providing information on penguins in Antarctica. So I'm not signed in. I'm not actually going to go through all the tasks, but I'm going to show you how you're going to want to step through the tutorial step by step to learn how to use the tools, how to mark, how to make classifications. And when you're ready to go, you hit let's go and you start doing these particular tasks. You've got a field guide over on the left where you can learn about the different penguin species. You also need some help with this task that you can click on if you get stuck and you're not sure whether to mark something or not. And then as you step through the images, as you complete all the tasks, you'll get two possibilities. You can click done, in which case you'll get the next image. We call the images subjects. All the things that we're looking at are subjects in the Zooniverse. So you can be done, or you can click done and talk if you want to discuss that image on the discussion board. You can also go to talk at any time. And this is where you want to be signed in, because in order to participate, you need to be a registered user. But this is where you can ask questions of the research teams, and you can also have discussions with other participators and with the moderators. In fact, if you become really good at a project, you might even become a project moderator. That's a possibility as well. So now I'm going to go back up here to get involved. We're going to leave Penguin Watch. And if you click on get involved, you can get information, one, on becoming a beta tester, if you're interested. There are people that sign up to help test new projects before they go on the main website, before they're launched, to basically see if the interface works well for people. You can also volunteer as a project moderator. If you click on education here, this is the general education forum where teachers can go to see how other teachers are integrating Zooniverse into their curriculum at different levels. So some of the projects involving animals are great for the early elementary school stages, and some of the more abstract physics projects may be more appropriate for high school and college level. Now up here, news, you go to for Daily Zooniverse and blog to get all sorts of useful information about what's going on across the Zooniverse. And I've already loaded a couple of blogs to tell you about some things that I think might be of interest to this audience in particular. So one blog from last March 2020 talks about how Zooniverse is being used by various organizations to fulfill service hour requirements. So that's something that students might be interested in checking out. You might check with your organizations and supply this link. I have it in my presentation as well. So you'll be able to access the link to this blog to learn all about how participating in Zooniverse can help you fulfill service hour requirements. So I also really briefly want to go to the most recent blog, a blog that I wrote. I know this isn't about astronomy tonight, but the reason I'm going to my blog here is because at the end of this blog, which is about a discovery that citizen scientists made working on the Milky Way project, at the end of this, there's a link to an article in a journal called Frontiers for Young Minds. And this is an academic journal for children and teens from about ages 8 to 15. And this is really neat for families and for teachers. The articles in this journal, and if you go up here to specialties, you can see the fields that are represented, fields like biodiversity and Earth and its resources. So these are written by scientists, but they're reviewed by kids, often with their teachers. So the articles have to be kid-friendly in order to make it into this journal. So that's a resource that you might want to check out. So let's see, a couple of other things I want to point out before going back to my presentation. So one of those things is the general talk facility. So that's where you go to ask questions about the Zooniverse platform as a whole, as opposed to an individual project. And then you can go to build a project. Again, if you're registered, you can read all about and learn about how you can create your own crowdsourced research project. And if there's time, I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But for the time being, I'm going to go back to my presentation. And actually, I'm going to go back one slide because I think I skipped over this really quickly. So these were a couple of the projects that I just wanted to highlight. I told you a little bit about Penguin Watch. Floating forests is a great one as well, where volunteers mark the presence and location of giant kelp forests within NASA Landsat satellite images that go back over 30 years. And the reason this is important is because we want to learn the impact of climate change on giant kelp forests, because these kelp forests are an indicator of the health of our oceans. And then Snapshot, Wisconsin is very similar in some respects to Chicago Wildlife Watch. So as sort of a summary of how to participate, step 1, register at Zooniverse. Step 2, choose a project that appeals to you. If you're an educator, check out the educational forum. Step 3, read about that project's information pages. And then finally, participate. Click on classify, go through the tutorial, and you can always get help if you need it. Now, some people only spend a few minutes perhaps on a certain project, but if you're really into a project and to get the most out of participation, I suggest a few things. Make use of those talk discussion boards. Use them to ask questions of the research teams, questions you might have about the research, and where to go for resources to learn more about the research. You might want to think about the project's goals and how the project itself might benefit science and society. We also would really appreciate feedback, so we'd like it if you take time to think about what you liked and didn't like participating in a project and how we could improve the interface, how the whole experience might be improved. And sort of that's our strategy behind giving you these participation surveys to fill out for us. So the other thing I would recommend is check out other platforms for citizen science if you like. NASA at science.nasa.gov hosts lists of various different platforms. My colleague at the Planetary Science Institute, Pamela Gay, has a platform called CosmoQuest. So there are other platforms that you can check out as well. And so finally, what I'd like to do is tell you about this initiative that Rohani mentioned that I'm leading with the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion. It's a program to engage diverse religious communities in citizen science with Zooniverse. So just as Faith in Place empowers diverse communities to take action for environmental justice, Zooniverse empowers people to participate in projects that reflect their interests and their values. So many of you attending this webinar today are members of religious communities, and you may be interested in how Zooniverse might be used to enrich some of your programs. So the primary goal of this initiative is really to build relationships of trust between scientists and diverse religious communities, and to foster new collaborations, especially between individuals from different cultures and backgrounds who might not otherwise get much of a chance to interact. And we do this by working with community leaders and individuals to do one or both of two things: to identify Zooniverse projects that could be used in different venues to support and supplement their programs, or in some cases, we can help communities build their own crowdsourced research projects using this Zooniverse Project Builder tool. So I'm going to give you just a couple of examples here. I've told you that Zooniverse is great to be incorporated in classrooms from early elementary school through college, but it can be incorporated into other different learning settings as well. And it has been. It's been used in group settings such as youth programs, youth education, youth summer camps, adult learning opportunities, and even in seminary classes looking to integrate scientific topics into their curricula. So really the possibilities are just limited by the imagination, and we all have great imaginations, right? So the other thing that Zooniverse can be used for is to build other research projects. And they don't necessarily have to be these humongous projects that are launched to the whole world on the main website. Supposing you're a community of faith that has a lot of digitized, maybe handwritten historical records, and you're looking to glean certain types of information, like information, person, places, and things. That doesn't need to go out to 1 million people, but maybe a few dozen or a few hundred people in your community could help do that sort of a project. So please contact me. You can email me at gwolfchase@gmail.com, or you can reach me through the sciencereligiondialogue.org/project/Zooniverse website. Contact me, have your community leader contact me to talk about the possibilities. And on that note, I'm going to invite Rohani back to introduce our next speaker, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Grace, for the informative presentation. Now, I'm sure we definitely have better understanding of what Zooniverse platform is all about. I especially love learning about the Galaxy Zoo and the floating forest of giant kelps. I feel like I'm watching some kind of science fiction movie. So it's awesome information. How awesome is that? Also imagine being connected with 2 million volunteers around the world of all ages and all walks of life. So if you have any question by now, I'm sure some of you have a number of questions. So feel free to write your question in the Q&A section, or you can also write the question in the chat section. So for those attendees who are just joining us, I would just like to welcome you to our Zooniverse webinar collaboration, Community Building with Zooniverse. My name is Rohani Nayan, and I'm currently the Chief Executive Officer at the Chicago Muslims Green Team. I moved to Chicago about 3 years ago to join my husband at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And my background is in teaching English as a second language and literacy. And I'm also trained to teach reading and writing to immigrant children and to train teachers how to do that. So of course, as an educator, I love the features found on Zooniverse platforms. Next, we are going to hear from our panelists who had actually used the Zooniverse platform in her community. Help me welcome Caroline Williams, who is the founder of Chicago Muslim Green Team, and now she serves as chair of the Research and Development Committee. She is also a board member of CMGT and Faith in Place. In her presentation, Caroline will share with us her motivation and benefits that she enjoyed from participating in citizen science projects since 2018. So welcome, Caroline. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Rohani, for the introduction. Assalamualaikum, peace be upon you all. I am very happy to be here to discuss citizen science, a field I am very passionate about because I love science. And I have education background in basic science in physics from Indonesia, a country in Southeast Asia, where I originally came from. Now I don't work as a scientist, but I still want to contribute in science. In the citizen science community, I regard myself as a community organizer. I want to help promoting citizen science to our interfaith communities. There are many reasons for me to do this. In my Muslim community, I always hear how Muslims greatly contribute to science in the old days, but now we feel like we are far behind. I also know many people in my community, including myself, who highly value science, and we don't feel like science is a threat to our belief. So why don't we do something together? And this is what I want to highlight in my work promoting citizen science to our faith-based community. Despite its name, citizen science does not require us to be citizens of a certain country or to be a scientist to do a project. Everyone can do the projects in the comfort of our home. My career as community organizer in the field of citizen science so far is in smooth trajectory because there are so many resources and so many support out there. I first contributed to citizen science when I joined City Nature Challenge in April 2018. They have it again this year. So if you're interested to join, you can easily Google City Nature Challenge 2021 to participate. After I joined or participate in the City Nature Challenge, I did 3 very easy projects listed in Science Starter, another citizen science platforms beside Zooniverse, and I got certificate for that. You can see the certificate in my presentation slides. A couple months after that, in June 2018, I was invited to host an affiliated citizen science Twitter account for a week. Here on the slide in the middle of it, you can see one of my tweets. And I got many responses for that. To my surprise, I was invited to join Citizen Science Asia as a global ambassador. In 2019, I got scholarship from NSF, National Science Foundation, to attend the International Citizen Science Conference in North Carolina as a Citizen Science Asia representative. At that time, I also was starting my nonprofit organization, Chicago Muslims Green Team. At that conference, I was invited to a meeting to form for the first time the Environmental Justice Working Group in the citizen science community. The reason of forming this group is to empower the community of people of color who often be the object of the scientific research, to have a strong voice and to actively participate in the research and to get benefits directly from the research. Here in the slides, I provide the 2 links if you're interested to learn more about this environmental justice group. I wrote an article from that conference about my experience, how I met many citizen science practitioners from Asia. And I wrote about the importance of many regional citizen science organizations. From this conference, I realized how huge this global citizen science movement is. There are citizen science community all over the world: Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, and Australia. And in 2017, the United Nations initiated the Citizen Science Global Partnership to invite all of these organizations to work together to advance citizen science for sustainable work. So I'm very excited about this. And when I'm excited about something, I always want to share it with people I care. So this is why I share this to my community. Here is a picture of me giving a speech about citizen science and interfaith community at the DIC Downtown Islamic Center, Toastmaster Club. And last February, Chicago Muslim Green Team organized Introduction to Citizen Science at Peggy Nothbart Nature Museum with speakers from the museum and Chicago Botanic Garden. And I met Dr. Grace when I volunteered at the Aldra Planetarium, and we just easily connected because we have similar passion in citizen science and faith-based community. And I love Zooniverse. There are so many interesting projects on Zooniverse. Project I did on Zooniverse so far is Galaxy Zoo, Notes from Butterflies, and Chicago Wildlife Watch. You will hear about it, why it's very interesting project. So in conclusion, the 3 main benefits I receive from doing citizen science project are: number 1, to get inspired and exposed to many opportunities and resources to contribute in science and environmental justice issues. Number 2, to feel empowered and have a meaningful position and impact in the citizen science community. Number 3, to get connected with the same-minded people all over the world. That's all my presentation. Thank you for your time and attention. Rohani?
Thank you very much, Caroline, for sharing your experiences with diverse citizen science organizations and your engagement in faith-based communities. So we hope your experience will encourage other people to check out and use the Zooniverse platforms. As we can see that the features, among the features, it can be used in tandem with citizen science organizations, and you can use it in diverse settings. I love the features being kid-friendly, and also especially the idea of having direct communication with your real-life scientists around the world. So it's so awesome. And finally, we get to hear from our last panelist from the Chicago Wildlife Watch, who will discuss his projects focus on monitoring urban wildlife and also assessing the biodiversity of the greater Chicagoland region. So please welcome Seth Magley. And let me give a little bit of Seth background. Seth is the director of the Urban Wildlife Institute at the Lincoln Park Zoo and the executive director of the Urban Wildlife Information Network. He first became interested in conservation and ecology as a college student while observing black-tailed prairie dogs living in sidewalk median strips. However, Seth's interests go far beyond prairie dogs to encompass all wildlife species impacted by urbanization and human development. He has published over 40 articles on urban wildlife ecology, and his vision is to help create a world in which urban ecosystems represent an important component of the worldwide conservation of biodiversity. So let us welcome Seth Magley.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rohani. I appreciate that. I'm going to try to share my screen. All right, hopefully you can see my slide. Can I get a thumbs up from someone that I can see on the little, yep, I got thumbs ups, great. Yeah, thank you all for being here. I'm very happy to talk to you. I'm gonna be giving a different sort of talk than the last two. It's gonna be very much from the perspective of a scientist, someone who is using data from Zooniverse and from our project, Chicago Wildlife Watch. And for whom that process is really very important. But I'm going to focus on the science end of it, so you get a sense of what are the end products when people are involved in community science or citizen science of this type. So yeah, as you heard, my name is Seth Magley. I'm the director of the Urban Wildlife Institute at the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. I am an urban biologist, but I guess maybe more than that, I'm a zoo biologist. And most people, when they envision a biologist who works at a zoo, they have a pretty specific picture in their head. They picture someone who travels far away from the US and who studies big, fuzzy, cute, exotic, rare, endangered things like lions or chimpanzees, and they're probably living out of like a Jeep, and they're probably like evading poachers and like all that really exciting Discovery Channel kind of stuff. And I know people like that. We work with people like that at Lincoln Park Zoo. They're very heroic. I respect them a lot. That is not what I do. That's not my life at all. My own study system is not nearly so remote or exotic. It is Chicago, the fourth largest city in the United States and the largest city in the Midwest. And the species I study, you've probably all seen. They're not rare. They're not in danger of extinction. They are things like foxes and raccoons. So I always first come prepared to talk about why a zoo is interested in investing time and resources and energy in these species that are not at risk of going extinct. They're not in any particular trouble. So why is that important? And the first point I like to make is that you would be surprised to know how little we know about these urban species. And it makes sense if you think about how people become wildlife biologists, right? They are those exact people I described, those people who want to be far from any civilization and they want to study the rarest thing they can find. That's what we all spend 10 years in school to become, not to study the squirrels in the Foot Locker parking lot, right? So as a result, the things that live right outside your door, wherever you live, we probably know a lot less about than we know about those rare and endangered things. Now, my colleagues sometimes will tell me that that's true, but that doesn't matter, that we don't need to know things about these common species because they're not important. This is a very unfortunate but pretty prevalent attitude in the scientific community, but I like to make the point that we as snobby scientists may have the luxury of not caring, but people don't. People who aren't scientists care a lot. And if you read blogs about nature or wildlife or anything really online, you figure out that People live in cities and people are interested in wildlife. So they're looking out their windows and they're seeing stuff. They're seeing skunks and squirrels and they have questions. They want to know what's going on with them. And typically most scientists, if we're honest, we don't have the answers they want because urban wildlife ecology is such a new discipline. We actually just had the anniversary of this event. This is a long time ago now, but in 2007, a coyote walked into a Quiznos in the Loop of Chicago, so in the most downtown part of Chicago, and she sat down next to the beverage cooler and she wouldn't leave. So why do urban animals do these weird things? We don't know, because we don't know why they live in cities. We don't know how they make their living. We don't know how they go about their day. And when they do odd things, it just puts into sharp relief this fact that we don't have the tools and the information that we need. This article, I'm a big fan of satire, and this is a satirical article from The Onion, and I love it because I feel like when even the satire newspapers are publishing articles about urban wildlife, that means people care. That means it's top of mind for many people. Also, this should be a real summit, and I totally want to go. So in addition to the fact that we just don't know things and it's fun to learn stuff, I think there are three big reasons we should care about urban wildlife. The first is conflict. Urban wildlife do things that annoy us or threaten us, right? They dig up our gardens, they dig under our houses, they transmit diseases to us, they pose a hazard to us as we drive. Sometimes they even attack our pets or us. If we knew more about their behavior, how they live and how they move around their environment, we could design urban areas that reduce these conflicts, that enabled us to coexist better with them. Related to that is the idea of urban conservation. I'm a conservationist. I believe in protecting biodiversity. I also believe that our planet is urbanizing at an incredibly rapid rate and that it will continue to do that my entire life. So I have two options, right? I can either spend all my time and energy trying to find pristine, rare, protected habitat to conserve, and people are doing that, and that's important. But what I think I need to do is to find a way to make that rapid urbanization not such a bad thing for biodiversity. And that means learning how to build cities that have a place for animals, where people and wildlife can coexist. We can still do all our human stuff we need to do, but leave a spot for nature. And that requires deep knowledge of these species and what they need and how they live. And then the third reason, which maybe is most relevant to this presentation, is outreach. I work for a zoo. Our mission is to connect people with nature. Well, to me, where you start with that is not by trying to convince people in inner city Chicago that they need to care about the endangered white rhino. It's to teach them that there are wildlife living in their neighborhood, right outside their door, that no matter where you live in a type of nature. And if you can get people to care about that, it opens all kinds of doorways to a broader appreciation of nature, of wild species. So we really believe strongly that a major reason to study urban wildlife is to increase ecological literacy and to teach people about their local species. And Chicago Wildlife Watch, as you'll hear eventually when I get there, is a big part of that. So all of that came together in this institute that I direct called the Urban Wildlife Institute. We are a research center that is housed within the Lincoln Park Zoo, and our mission is to do the research needed to help people and wildlife coexist in cities all around the world. We do that through a pretty unique research platform that we devised in Chicago that was pretty different from the way anyone else was studying wildlife, which is to say that we don't focus on one species. We don't try to answer one hypothesis. We have built a long-term observatory that collects data on many, many different kinds of species. This is a map of Chicago. All these little colored dots you can see on it, those are field stations. We have over 100 field stations that we maintain in perpetuity across the city. And so some of them are right downtown. Those are the orange dots. But some of them expand out through suburbs, through exurban and rural areas so that we can understand how the wildlife community changes across what we call an urban gradient. So we set up this huge monitoring infrastructure. And then at each of these little dots on this map, these 100+ dots, we collect data in all 4 seasons. So we're not just trying to collect summer data the way some researchers would. We want to understand what's going on with wildlife all year round. And we use a variety of different technologies. So mostly what I'll talk about today is our camera trap data. We put camera traps at these sites. This gives us pictures of medium to large size mammals, which is a great start. But we don't stop there. We also collect data on insects. Actually, in this case, we're collecting data on an insect who's on a camera case, as you see with this walking stick insect. But we also collect data on birds. We collect data on vegetation. We collect data on bats. Birds and bats we study with acoustic techniques. We are casting an extremely wide mental net to gather data on the entirety of the urban wildlife ecosystem so that we not only understand what's going on with each species, but how they fit together, how the system as a whole works. The thing I get excited about is the fact that while some of our field stations look like this is me setting up a camera trap in a nice buckthorn invaded forest preserve, and that's important. But people have been studying wildlife in the forest preserves for decades. It's kind of known what lives there. We are also working on sites that look like this. This is a camera trap underneath the L, the major train that goes through Chicago, in an urban park where no one had thought to study the animals before we did. So just to head you off, I always get this question, okay, you put up all these cameras and stuff in urban areas, don't they all get stolen? It does happen. So these little Jedis do not look scary, but they actually broke 2 of my cameras on the same day. So it does happen. We lose cameras, but we just keep going. We just don't let that stop us, because you can't let that be a reason not to collect your data. So we get images of all different kinds of animals on our camera traps. The camera trap part of this study is definitely the largest urban wildlife camera trap study anywhere in the world, in Chicago, which is kind of exciting. And we get lots of things, right? In the suburbs, we get tons of deer because they're incredibly abundant. All across the city, of course, you won't be surprised to know we get tree squirrels. We actually have 2 species, fox and gray squirrels, and we're sort of tracking which species is outcompeting the other where, which is kind of an interesting question. Skunks are doing quite well across the city. They're having no problems. And other than kind of smelling bad, they actually don't do much bad to us. You know, they dig up gardens a little bit, but they also control a lot of insect pests, which is cool. And speaking of ecosystem services, possums, I think people tend to not like them, I guess, because of the rat tails and maybe the weird face, but possums eat all kinds of bugs. They eat ticks, which makes me happy. I hate ticks. So possums really do great things for us. Raccoons, of course, one of the most abundant urban mammals in Chicago and many North American cities, just incredibly good at living everywhere, eating our garbage, which is why we sometimes call them trash pandas. In the case of this one, learning to stand on its hind legs, which is terrifying, actually. Coyotes. I get asked a lot of questions about coyotes. They're doing quite well across the city. They're actually mostly very good at avoiding us. They live their lives, they do their thing, and they stay away from humans most of the time. Here's a nice image. You can see how urban this setting is where these coyotes are. I especially like this shot we got of this one in a cemetery. To me, it looks like a kind of almost like a postcard picture from this camera trap. And then foxes, there's actually still 2 species of foxes in the Chicago area, red foxes and gray foxes. This is a red fox. Neither of those species is doing well, though. They seem to be disappearing from the metro area. We think being outcompeted by coyotes, which is kind of interesting. Oh, this guy, this is a woodchuck. People always think this is a beaver. This is actually a woodchuck or a groundhog or a whistle pig, I guess. Some people call them that. I like these guys. They're doing okay in the suburbs. They don't really live in the city, but they're doing all right in the suburbs. They're, you know, very harmless and kind of stick to themselves, although they do like digging under people's stuff when it's time for them to hibernate, which can be a bit of a problem. But speaking of beavers, here's a beaver. Beaver actually are right in the city. We see beaver all through Chicago. They are making a real nuisance of themselves because they like knocking down trees and we like planting trees. So there's a little conflict there to try to manage. But they're very interesting and they're incredibly fun to watch if you've ever seen beavers swimming around. And now we'll get into some of the rarer stuff we see. We actually see a lot of flying squirrels across the city. People are often surprised to hear about these guys living in the city of Chicago, but eastern flying squirrels are pretty common. People like watching them in their backyards. If you look closely at this one, you can see those big eyes. They have enormous eyes because they're super nocturnal and they need to take in the light that they can find. But you can also even see the skin flaps, which are called patagia, between the front and hind legs, which is how they glide. So this is pretty neat that we can capture images of these guys. And yeah, speaking of unlikely urban dwellers, also mink. Throughout the suburbs along some of the waterways like Salt Creek, we see mink pretty commonly. Kind of funny to think that these guys, you know, were sort of farmed for coats for a long time. And now some of them are doing quite well living in these urban waterways or suburban, at least, waterways. In the Chicago metro area, we see them relatively frequently. Now, one of the fun things about having a big camera trap project is you start to get pictures of multiple species in the same image, and that gives you some sense into how they interact. As an ecologist, that's what we're curious about often. So like you get this raccoon and this coyote, you know, this raccoon in this kind of defensive posture, potentially with response to this coyote. And you can contrast that with like this raccoon and this deer, right? Where this raccoon does not seem concerned about the deer, as of course it doesn't need to be. They're not going to have any kind of a conflict between those 2 species. But then you could look at this raccoon and this opossum, right? This is clearly some kind of a standoff that's happening here. So it gives you some insight into how these species interface with one another. But camera traps are not very smart. They will take a picture of anything that moves in front of them. So we also get lots of images of dogs. We get lots of images of cats. We get lots of images of all sorts of miscellaneous human associated things like this. Sometimes we get an image of something that I am baffled by, like this. This is a dude wearing a Halloween mask on purpose to mess with me and my team. But we made a decision pretty early on in the project, I think it was a good decision, that when we get images of pets and livestock and people, we record them in the database the same way we would anything else, because they're a critical part of the system. And what we've learned in our modeling is that in a lot of cases, the key thing that determines where animals will go is where the people are. And usually they're trying to avoid us. So you can't understand like how a coyote moves through this landscape without understanding where the humans are. And the cameras give us a little bit of insight into that too. All right, but what I promised I was going to do is not just nerd out about science, but tell you how we connect with the public. And there's really two projects here to talk about. One I'll just touch on very briefly is a project called Partners in Fieldwork. This is a program where we go to middle schools and high schools in underserved communities around Chicago, and we give them all the fun science toys that we use. We give them camera traps, we give them bat monitors and bird monitors, we give them binoculars, we give them field guides. We train them to the point where their school becomes one of our field data stations, and we use the data from it the same way we use any other data, which is fun for me. I like having more data sets, data points. That's great. But I think more importantly, we're helping to expose a new generation of kids to STEM, including kids in underserved communities who may not think about STEM as a career. And we're improving ecological literacy among people who may not have had that opportunity. So this has been a super successful project, but it's not actually the one I came to talk to you about. The one I came to talk to you about, as you've been hearing, is Chicago Wildlife Watch. As Dr. Wolfchase went through in detail, this is a Zooniverse project. It was built in conjunction with the Adler Planetarium. I'm not going to walk you through exactly how the site works because A, Dr. Wolfchase already did that, and B, you could figure it out. It's not challenging, but just very briefly, when you go there, within 3 clicks or so, you will actually be looking at images of wildlife from our camera traps. There's a little guide on the right side, and we're going to ask you to help us figure out what is the animal in that image. And if you mouse over those names on the right, it'll give you some tips if you are stuck, if you're having trouble. This seems kind of silly, but because we have so many camera traps set up for so long, we have more images than those of us at the zoo could possibly go through. So we can't do our research without this step. We need to know what animals are in what images, and we need Zooniverse, we need Chicago Wildlife Watch to help us do that. Without it, the rest of it all completely grinds to a halt. Again, though, I also hope we are helping the public in that we are helping teach people what kinds of things you might see in your neighborhood, how to tell them apart, help keep an eye out for things as you walk around and become a little more literate about nature and ecology in your backyard. Obviously, I would love it if anyone here wants to check it out. Just works great on mobile devices or anywhere else. Just go to chicagowildlifewatch.org. This has really been an amazing resource for us in our project. We've had over 8,000 people who registered use the site. So more than that, because as you heard, you don't have to register, but we have 8,000 registered users on Chicago Wildlife Watch. Actually, using this platform has become part of several university courses on urban wildlife and urban ecology, which is really good to see. Our volunteers have completed 14 seasons worth of data tagging, which is kind of remarkable. And during COVID, actually, the rate has increased because I think people are stuck inside and bored and want to contribute. A total of 250,000 images have been tagged, but the way the algorithm works, it's not as simple as one user clicks on something and then it's tagged. We actually look for agreement between multiple users. So what that means is there've been about 1 million total tags, like people look at an image, click, say what it is. That's happened about 1 million times in this website, which is to me kind of just incredible. Just boggles my mind. So I thought I would show you just, actually Dr. Wolfchase did a good job of talking about this too, but show you some of the kinds of conversations that happen on the talk pages, because I think it really helps show you the power of what people are learning and sort of what interactions they're having. Are you still seeing my screen? Can everybody see my talk page? Okay, thumbs up from, okay, great. So here's one. This is a great picture of a coyote, and then but someone's asking, the user's asking, is this a coyote? And someone's responding, yeah, this is a daytime coyote. And this launches a conversation about, oh, I was surprised to see it during the day so close to houses. This behavior seems to be more common. And then they're asking one of my staff, do you agree? And then the scientists are weighing in and saying, this is right. Coyotes are common, but they usually aren't out during the day, but it can happen. This is a cemetery, and that's where you would expect that. So it just shows you how you can easily get into these dialogues with researchers and really get your questions answered and learn a lot. Let's see the next one. Let's do the second one here. All right, this is an image of kind of a blurry thing. It's kind of hard to make out what it is. I thought this was two opossums fighting, but now I see it's a bunch of babies. That's really cool. Great find. Female opossums carry their young on their back. Hard work. So this is someone who learned something about something adorable and got to see baby animals. And that just seems like the best possible outcome from my standpoint. All right, we'll do a third one here. All right, we've got a kind of an odd coloration on the squirrel, right? It's hard to tell if it's got snow on him or if it's partially white. And someone says, very interesting pigment on the squirrel. Couldn't tell if it's a fox or a gray with all the white. And Liza, again, my colleague, says, I'm not sure we've ever seen a squirrel with this coloration. So, you know, you heard earlier about how you can discover completely new things on these platforms. That's even true with Chicago Wildlife Watch, where, you know, you'd think you're looking at urban animals. Everybody's seen all this before, but this could be a new coloration, some kind of new variant, some new morph of this squirrel that some user discovered just going through these images. So there's always a chance that you'll be the one who comes across something that's kind of amazing. All right, last one of these. This is a flying squirrel, kind of similar to the flying squirrel picture I showed you. Might be hard to see. It's kind of in the back left of this image. And people are saying, I've never seen a flying squirrel before. My first flying squirrel. Awesome. Love the flying squirrel. So I like the positivity and that people get so excited about the things that they can discover if they kind of squint close at some of these images. All right, keep going here. So obviously, we're scientists. We're trying to create key results from this. We've been very successful in that. We couldn't do it without our Chicago Wildlife Watch users, but we're publishing things about, for example, about opossums, finding that they are really tied to water in Chicago, which is not usual for opossums. So that's pretty strange and interesting. We're publishing about the role of different neighborhoods. Actually, in this paper, we proved that coyotes and raccoons prefer wealthier neighborhoods in Chicago, which is pretty interesting. Must have something to do with how garbage is secured or how rabbits move around. Not totally sure, but the data were pretty clear that they really prefer the richer parts of the city. This was a study that's pretty cool where we found that there are different wildlife communities and different types of green space around Chicago. So for example, a cemetery has a very different urban wildlife community than a golf course or than a park, which was not known before. And this was a paper where we looked at predator-prey dynamics and found that deer and rabbits, as traditional prey species, actually don't have the same ability to avoid their predator, in this case coyotes, in the city that they do in their natural habitat. And that means that the entirety of our understanding of ecological dynamics of how predators and prey behave breaks down in the city. It doesn't work the same way at all. It's a pretty foundational finding. And again, we couldn't do any of that without help from our friends, our colleagues who work on Chicago Wildlife Watch. There are even broader impacts than the science, though, I think. We want our data to be used to change the way Chicago is developed to leave more space for wildlife. To that end, we get involved in the public policy sphere. Lately, a lot of people are asking me about wildlife during COVID. Are there animals out more? It seems like maybe they're taking over the city, some people are saying. You see a lot of news stories about this. You should be a little careful as you read them because some of them are fake. There's a lot of fake news stories about wildlife during COVID, but we have the data that we will be able to address this. Our cameras are out before, during, and after COVID. Our volunteers on Chicago Wildlife Watch are going through them now, and in time, we will be able to actually say, here's what happened with animals during COVID. Here's what that means for how we should recreate, for how we should construct bike paths and hiking trails and all of that, because we will learn a lot from how a change in human behavior modifies animal behavior. And as I said, I spent a lot of time talking to congressmen. This is me talking to Congressman Mike Quigley, being on boards and panels for things like the Chicago Nature and Wildlife Plan and the Wild Mile. I am often the one at the table trying to advocate for wildlife in these big urban development projects, and I can only do that because I have data behind me, and I only have data behind me because of Chicago Wildlife Watch. So in an indirect way, everybody who clicks on these images, they are part of making these big decisions about how we craft the city of Chicago. Here's another example of that. Actually, we were invited by Animal Care and Control to help draft a new wildlife management and coexistence plan for the city. So this is going to be policy that will be followed by Animal Care and Control officers, which again has the data of Chicago Wildlife Watch behind it. The other kind of neat thing that has happened is that this model has been relatively successful, and it has led to Chicago being seen as a leader for urban wildlife. Realizing that, we actually created a network called the Urban Wildlife Information Network, which is an alliance of other researchers in other cities across, right now, the United States and Canada, who are using the same methods we use. So they develop the same system of field sites, they collect data the same way, and then we compile it all together so that we make this global repository of urban wildlife data that can be used to help create wildlife-friendly policies that aren't just local, right, that are global. So this network has grown rapidly. We actually have 35 partnering cities in the Urban Wildlife Information Network now. Again, no one would have followed our lead if what we were doing wasn't working, and what we were doing wouldn't work without Chicago Wildlife Watch. So in a way, Chicago Wildlife Watch helped us to spread our science from one city to 35 cities, which is pretty exciting. And some of those cities have their own Wildlife Watch type projects. This is from our partners in LA that we work with on this network, and they have a Zooniverse project called Wildlife of Los Angeles. So the science has gotten bigger, the policy implications have gotten bigger, and even the citizen science, the community science part has gotten bigger, all thanks to this one little project that we built with the Adler and with Zooniverse, which is kind of amazing to think about, and a project that any one of you can be a part of if you like. So I'm going to close with my background image that's also behind me. This is a mosaic of a coyote made out of images of coyotes from all across the Urban Wildlife Information Network. So all those little boxes that you see, those are coyotes, different places and times. If you help us with this project, or really any Zooniverse project, this is essentially what you're doing, right? You are taking these little snapshots of data that researchers piece together into a picture of how our world works. And that's kind of amazing, I think, if you think about it. So we are on Twitter. There's a website for the Urban Wildlife Information Network. And at the end, if there's time, I will be happy to take any of your questions. But in the meantime, I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seth Magley. Wow, what an awesome presentation. I just love how Zooniverse is being used from a scientist point of view here. Like Seth said, someone who is using data. The images shared here are just awesome. And it's just a great demonstration of how our world works and are connected. And I don't know about you, but at least what I have learned from all these presentations, we know that a zoo is not only for visiting, learning, seeing live animals, but there are so many other things going on, like what's going on at Seth's Research Center. And we also know now why urban wildlife matter, because it gives us the opportunity to connect with nature and care for our environment and wildlife. It's awesome. I just love learning about all these things. And especially we also learn about some of the challenges that Seth and his team face, how to maintain their electronic equipment, like the camera traps big in the city, because they do get broken and they do get stolen. So thank you very much to our wonderful panelists. And now let's have our question and answer session. And if you have any question you want to ask, please feel free to use the chat section on your right side of the screen. And I do have about 3 questions here. And one question is for Zooniverse, and I'll read the question and I'll ask which of the panelists would like to answer the question. Okay. Question number 1, what if I make a mistake when I'm classifying something on Zooniverse? What should I do? So yes, go ahead, Grace.
So either I or Seth could answer that question. So as Seth mentioned, that there are more than one person that looks at each individual image or photograph. In some projects, there are as many as 20 to 50 people who are looking at each subject. So there are a lot of studies that have shown that people on average do a great job. So basically do the best you can, but don't sweat it, because there are other people that are looking as well. And people do a great job. So in fact, you can read about some of that if you want to get into some of the heavy academic publications. If you hit publications on Zooniverse and scroll down, there are a number of papers under what are called meta studies that look at how citizen science do, look at applications to machine learning and all sorts of interesting things. So check out some of those as well. Seth may want to add some more. I got the sense that at least 4 people are looking at each photograph in Chicago Wildlife Watch.
That's exactly right. I would have said exactly what you said, but just the math is really smart. And so how many people need to look at an image depends on whether everyone has agreed and also what species it is. So if it's something easy like a deer, we don't require as many people if they all agree it's a deer before it comes out. But if it's something tricky like a red or a gray fox, we require a higher number of people to all agree. And if they don't agree and they continue to not agree, at some point it's flagged for one of my staff or me to look at. So yeah, don't sweat your mistakes. I make them when I'm quickly clicking through stuff, and it comes out in the wash, which is great.
Okay, thank you very much, Grace and Seth. Now next, I have a question for Chicago Wildlife Watch. Is there a possibility for Chicago Wildlife Watch to collaborate with iNaturalist to get more image data submitted by the people who take pictures of wildlife in Chicago and identify it using iNaturalist?
Yeah, we have an iNaturalist page. I love collaboration. There's sort of a fundamental difference between our data, which are collected systematically along transects in kind of a rigorous way, and something that's fully community sourced like iNaturalist, where it is, where people choose to detect something and send it in, right? So connecting those two data sets together is possible, but it requires incredibly difficult statistics. Now, fortunately, I have a really smart statistician who works for me, not me. And he could probably make something like that happen. It's just a matter of, having a grant or having a specific hypothesis that would drive that. But yeah, things like that are absolutely possible. In fact, I have a good colleague who works in Madison, Wisconsin, who compared iNaturalist data with camera trap data with actually GPS collar data from carnivores, and found that there was pretty good agreement that actually all of those different sources were tracking carnivores in Madison pretty well. So yeah, it's totally possible.
Okay.
Rohani, you're muted.
Man, see, thank you, Grace. Okay, thank you for the reminder. Next, we have a question for Zooniverse. Is there an example on how a faith-based community can use Zooniverse Citizen Science Project to do activity in a house of worship?
So I've got several examples, actually. At the end of January, I co-led along with a youth leader at a Presbyterian church in the Bay Area of California. They had evening classes for middle school and high school youth, and they themed a class around God and physics. So what is we used Galaxy Zoo that Caroline knows about, she's participated in it, and showed them how to basically classify different shapes of galaxies. And I talked a little bit about how the galaxy shapes give us a lot of clues to the history of galaxies. And then the youth leader took them through thinking about, well, we live in this awesome, large, old universe. How do you relate that to your faith and how you think about God? So it was about stimulating the way they thought about some of the things that they were learning in church and some of the awesome things they were seeing through this project. So that's one example of using a Zooniverse project with a youth class. We have also used Zooniverse in seminary classrooms. So I worked with a wonderful professor Sharon Grant at Hood Theological Seminary in North Carolina, which is predominantly African-American, very high African-American percentage. I think it's in the African-American Episcopalian Methodist tradition, but it trains across a broad range of Christian denominations. And they have both summer camps for youth, but Professor Grant was having seminary students choose from a list of projects to basically accompany her class on the history of Christianity. So some context here. The AAAS DOSA program, the Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion, has a Science for Seminaries program where seminaries can write grant proposals for looking for creative ways to bring science into the curriculum for seminary students. And so they do this in all sorts of creative ways, but we thought by bringing Zooniverse projects in, the seminarians could not just learn about some subject areas of science, but could actually would participate through the discussion boards, and then would reflect on what they've learned and the connections they made. And the connections were wonderful. These seminary students, I don't have them at my fingertips right now, but produced the most incredible essays talking about what they had gained from these scientific projects, and then reflecting on how they think about some of these things, how they could relate this to basically theology, to some of the things that they were learning in seminary class. It was excellent. So those are a couple of examples. I've got plenty.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So for those of you who are interested to follow this topic better in depth, please feel free to contact Grace about this topic. And I do have one last question that I'm going to answer because we have 7 minutes left. So the last question is for Chicago Wildlife Watch. Will you use machine learning to do classification? Do you think machine learning can replace the human classification in your project?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, it will never replace human classification, at least not in my lifetime. What we hope it might be able to do is to sort of weed out the empties and the human photos, which actually the empties and human photos are a large percentage of our total photos, and our users get very frustrated going through all the empties. We have worked with a number of different AI companies and students to work on machine learning tools. So far, none of them work very well for us. Unlike projects that work on like tigers, right, that have really distinct markings, our animals are blurry. Most of them are night shots, so they're black and white. Our cameras are low quality because they are stolen a lot, so we don't buy expensive ones, so the pixel count is low. We have the worst kind of data for machine learning tools. That said, eventually, yes, those tools will work well, and they will make the experience for our Chicago Wildlife Watch users much better. They'll be mostly looking at animals, and maybe one day even it'll take out the deer or something, the stuff that's really easy. But the stuff that's hard, I can't see not requiring human input. So it'll make it better, but it's not gonna, we won't be able to shut down the page because of that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Seth Magley. So I hope that answered the question to the person who posed the question. So, well, I guess we have, yes.
There's another question in the chat I noticed from Pastor Roger Tim, who I know from many years ago,
Awesome.
is talking about whether there are any projects dealing with water quality and how varieties of water quality differs between, say, wealthy communities and poorer communities. That's a great question, Roger. I'm not aware of any projects that are focused specifically on water quality in Zooniverse. Seth, did you have something to say? Or
no, I'm just showing off my cat.
I
do have something to add though to this topic when you're done.
Because now I think that there are probably, so there are online citizen science projects. There are also various in-person citizen science projects. There may be some there may be some in-person projects that actually explore that, or maybe on other platforms. But one thing you could do, Roger, is just like peruse the biology and the nature, click on the biology and nature projects and look at some of those descriptions, because there really are a large number of projects that are focused on different areas of the environment. And now I'll let Seth put in his 2 cents.
Me and my cat. Yeah, we're not working on water quality, but I did want to point out that I didn't have time to talk about it, but actually our work these days has a very strong environmental justice component, and we're looking heavily into how wildlife are unequally distributed across different neighborhoods, not just in Chicago, but in many cities, and how, for example, poorer communities and communities of color are more likely to bear the brunt of nuisance wildlife, whereas sort of beneficial species that give ecosystem services are more likely to be found in wealthier, whiter neighborhoods. And we've been able to link that, for example, to historic redlining and other racist practices. So environmental justice is becoming an increasing part of what we do, just on the wildlife side, not on the water side.
Thank you very much, Seth and Grace. Do we have any more questions? I don't see any. Just hello, cat. All right. Okay. So in summarizing, I'd like to thank everybody for coming here today, and especially thank you very much to all our panelists for the description of the special attributes of how this Zooniverse platform can be used in your community and also in connecting to other community. And there are wonderful features and a clear explanation how to participate, and especially for all the efforts that all of you put into these wonderful ongoing projects. To care for other species and to protect the lives of our wonderful planet. So thank you very much. I think the tutorial given by Grace is especially very helpful for newcomers and users of the platform. So clearly, we know that Zooniverse hosts many projects related to ecology, climate change, and environmental justice. And so we know that by now, towards the end, just to remind everybody, the Zooniverse platform is a citizen science platform that allows all people, no matter their background, training, or expertise, to contribute to real academic research. You can be a child, you can be 100 years old, you can contribute to research and get connected to real science. So it is for everyone. It's easy to have access to, and it's free. It's a completely an egalitarian platform. So what else can we ask for, right? So as the scientists in our panelists say, they do need data. They do need data. So what we ask you to do is please provide your feedback, which is badly needed about this webinar, so that we can improve our future program. So please take some time to fill in the webinar post survey. You can see the link in the chat section.
Rohani,
yeah.
One interruption. I noticed there are things going out from Faith in Place to panelists. That's not what we want. We want to include the attendees.
This is the exit survey.
So I put the exit survey into the panelists and attendees.
Right.
And the Earth Day Sunset Vigil, I think we also want to
Thursday,
distribute that to
this.
everybody.
Definitely, yes.
It's only to the panelists. So
right.
you need to click on the to button below on the chat and send to panelists and attendees.
Okay, panelists. All right. So I think it's put out there. Thank you very much. And so it's not a long survey. It will take about less than 5 minutes. So please make sure, go to the post survey link, as we need the scientists need data about our webinar today. And last but not least, we have to say, I would like to give special thanks to Katie Maxwell and Isioma Odom, who for their wonderful planning and execution of the processes involved. And they are not on screen with us, but they have been our wonderful support behind the scene. And also, as you can see, we have some, don't forget to visit all the websites that are given on the chat right now, and join us in our upcoming program, like Faith in Place is hosting this Thursday, the Earth Day Sunset Vigil on April 8th at 6 to 7:30 p.m. It'll be an inspiring evening celebrating our Earth with a sunset candlelight vigil, youth showcase, eco art gallery, and more. Very fun. And also don't forget to check out CMGT's webpage, especially my project, Plant Sleeping Mat Project, which is an effort to keep non-recyclable materials such as plastic bags out of our landfills. And so I will put the details in the chat. So I think that's it. I have covered what we are supposed to cover, I hope. Shout out to everybody. And let me see if any other, nope, no other announcement. So thank you very much, everybody, for supporting this program. We hope you have a wonderful evening. And so may peace, good health, and love be on all of you and your loved one. Have a restful evening. So
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.